Hello everyone, you have come to Tata Comic Preview channel. Let read together. Have fun. This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. If Zhou had any doubts and questions before this, they had completely been dispelled by the nine-leaf avatar. In truth, she was already convinced by Zhou when she stepped onto the flying chariot. The attitude of the disciples from the three sects had confirmed the fact that the seven great sects had attacked Golden Court Mountain. However, when she saw the nine-leaf golden lotus with her own eyes, she was still amazed. The disciples of the three sects stared at the golden lotus with its 9 leaves. Before this, the nascent divinity tribulation realm cultivators were hesitating and wondering if they should try severing their golden lotuses. If they acted fast enough, they would be ahead of their peers. Nonetheless, faced with uncertainties, the danger was much greater as well. Leaves can be formed after severing the golden lotus. The golden lotus can be formed again as well. So that's what a 9-leaf golden lotus looks like. How did the evil Sky Pavilion achieve this so soon? The others haven't even started severing their golden lotuses yet. They could hardly remain calm. This was the equivalent to finding out that a player had already cleared all the stages before the game went into beta testing. Everyone, naturally, had a tough time coming to terms with it. 10 quiet seconds passed by in just a blink of an eye. It was too short a time for the people present to admire the unique avatar. They felt as though they were looking at the finest sculpture in the world. Before they could have their fill looking at it, it had disappeared. After the avatar vanished, Zhou stood with his hands on his back and looked at Yuan'er, who was sitting in the wooden chair. Yuan'er's exhaustion seemed to have vanished. He looked spry at this moment, and his eyes were brimming with excitement. Even his wizened face was flushed with a healthy color. It seemed like he had regressed 10 years younger just from looking at the 9-leaf avatar. After a long moment of silence, Zhou finally said, "What do you think?" Zhou's words pulled everyone back to their senses. Yuan'er said, "It's worth it." "Truly? If I can see it once more, I'll be able to die in peace," Yuan'er praised. "This old thing. Give him an inch, and he asks for a foot. I'm already doing you a great service by showing it to you once. Do you think that merit points fall from the skies?" Despite Zhou's inner thoughts, he stroked his beard and said with a neutral expression, "Don't be greedy." Yuan'er sighed. He raised his hand slightly and said, "In any case, thank you, Brother G. Don't mention it. May I ask you something? It's about the method to attain the 9-leaf stage." Yuan'er was about to return to dust anyway. With one leg in the coffin, he only wanted this information for his disciples. Therefore, he mustered his courage to ask this question. After all, if he did not ask, nobody would dare to ask this question. Upon hearing Yuan'er's question, an eager and excited expression appeared on Nangongwei and Fengyi's faces. Similarly, the core disciples of the three sects looked at Zhou expectantly as well. Zhou stroked his beard and nodded. The method of severing the golden lotus is not a lie. Upon hearing this, the others grew emotional. As expected, the method is real. However, the mortality rate of severing one's golden lotus was too high. Due to this, many were discouraged and did not dare to try it. However, as more and more people experimented, the survival rates rose as well. Apart from without the golden lotus, sprouting leaves might be a problem. Moreover, they did not know if they could form another golden lotus as well. However, with Zhou's affirmation, it had given them a boost of courage. Apart from that, Zhou seemed to have set a new standard in the cultivation world. Who would be willing to share their method of reaching the 9-leaf stage with others? Ordinary individuals would not be so magnanimous to do such a thing. Nangongwei, Fengyi, Yuan'er said in a deep voice. "Yes." Both of them responded in unison. "Why aren't you thanking the senior?" Upon hearing Yuan'er's words, Nangongwei and Fengyi realized their transgression in the midst of their excitement. Nangongwei did not bow at once. Instead, he took a few steps backward, circulated his primal chi, and projected his voice so it resounded through the 10 holy lands. Thank you, old senior Ji. Falniji did the same. The disciples of the 3 sects who left heaven's virtue were not too far away. When they heard their sect master's words, they knew what it meant. They hovered around the 20 peaks, formed several square formations, and followed their sect master's cue in thanking Zhou. Thank you, old senior Ji. The sound waves overlapped as everyone expressed their gratitude to Zhou. Upon seeing this, Mingxian felt pride swell in his chest. Ding. Worshipped by 3,500 individuals and 1,500 pious individuals. Reward, 18,500 merit points. Note, deliberate and contrived worshipping will not be rewarded. When Zhou heard this notification, he was initially surprised. Then, he made some quick calculations in his heart. There were many disciples in the 3 sects. However, those who could freely enter and leave the Holy Land merely numbered around 5,000. This meant the ratio of those who were piously worshipping him was even lower. Although this was a quicker way of earning merit points, there was still the risk of having his merit points deducted if he was not careful about the way he went about things. He would be in great trouble if that were to happen. The negative 100,000 merit points he received when he had just transmigrated here were still fresh in his mind. At this moment, Yuan'er said, "What do you plan to do now that you've attained the 9-leaf stage, Brother Ji?" "Move on to the 10-leaf stage, of course," Zhou replied casually. Yuan'er seemed to have remembered something. He said, "Brother Ji, have you really come to?" "That's right. There are 2 reasons why I came to see you. Indeed, I wanted to pay you a final visit before your passing. Nobody in this world can escape from that shackle. Your passing will mean that I've lost yet another acquaintance." The others sighed in despair upon hearing these words. Although their expressions were appropriate, it felt insincere. Yuan'er was unlike the disciples of the 3 sects. He said in a deep voice, "Hearing your words, I feel that my time in this world has been worthwhile." Mingxian wanted to make a vomiting gesture again, but he resisted that urge when he saw Yuan'er's changes. Yuan'er's breathing had become shallow, and he was losing vitality. "There's no need to tell me the second reason, Brother Ji. I know it." "Ha! You finally believe me, Brother Ji." Yuan'er remembered something in the past. "Yes. It's been 300 years. If she didn't leave behind that cultivation method, I wouldn't have been able to conquer the 3 sects. The world thinks that I'm some genius, but I'm only an average man," Yuan'er said as he shook his head before laughing in a self-deprecating manner. The others were shocked and perplexed when they heard Yuan'er's words. Who was the Ishi that Yuan'er mentioned? What was their patriarch hiding? Did someone support the 3 sects until it reached its height today? This was the main reason Zhou came to heaven's virtue today. Back then, Yuan'er's cultivation talent was nothing out of the ordinary, but he suddenly improved by leaps and bounds. He and Ji Tiandao were old acquaintances. Although the paths they took were different, there was no conflict of interest. The world wanted to know why Yuan'er's cultivation base improved drastically. Yuan'er said that he met an elite who told him the 8-leaf stage was not the end. The 9-leaf and 10-leaf stages were attainable. However, nobody believed him then. They took him as a joke. Zhou nodded, stroked his beard, and said, "Back then, I thought you were bluffing. Time will tell. The 9-leaf stage is the greatest proof." Yuan'er seemed content and triumphant. When he recalled everything that he had done, he felt no remorse. When he saw the hard truth of the cultivation world crumble with his own eyes, he felt that he had lived a good life. Yuan'er's thoughts wandered back to 300 years ago. Unfortunately, things have changed, and the people were long gone. She left the cultivation method behind, and you cultivated it. Your cultivation base improved greatly, and you became the chief of the 3 sects. Back then, nobody would have thought this was possible, Zhou said. Yes. Yuan'er nodded in agreement. What's her name? Zhou asked. Yuan'er looked remorseful. He shook his head and said, a person like her can hardly be tracked down. I don't know her name. Perhaps, she has already attained the 10-leaf stage a long time ago and is now living in seclusion. 10-leaf stage? The others were thoroughly shocked and frightened when they heard this. The 9-leaf stage was enough to cause one to feel amazed. To think that there was someone at the 10-leaf stage. Was their patriarch spouting nonsense before his death? That's what I gather from her words. I don't know if she's actually at the 10-leaf stage. Perhaps not. Yuan'er seemed tired and launched into a coughing fit after he spoke. What does she look like? She's young. Yuan'er answered weakly. At this moment, Zhou, who stood beside Zhou, shook her head and said, I'm afraid she must be a bag of old bones now, like me. Yuan'er glanced at Zhou. He managed a chuckle but did not say anything. Mingxirin said, no matter how old she is, she helped Senior Yun rise to prominence from the dust. There's no doubt she's extraordinary. This was the truth. Zhou could not refute these words. She had always prided herself on being a genius. From the moment she stepped into the Confucian sect, the Confucian sect disciples called her a rare cultivation genius who would only show up once every few hundred years. Unfortunately, she was born female. If she was allowed to climb her way up to the highest position in the Confucian sect back then, perhaps, she could also peek into the world of the 9-leaf stage. Perhaps, she could be a 9-leaf cultivator now, or perhaps, she could have died trying. In any case, there was no point dwelling on it. Humans were faced with countless choices in life. No matter which path they chose, they would still wonder about the path not taken. Regrets could never change the outcome. They could only briefly entertain their fantasies. At this moment, everyone wondered who was the person who helped Yuan'er defy his fate. Where did she come from? Yuan'er was old. His mind was not as keen as before. He found it difficult to recall many things. Disordered fragments filled his mind. His mind seemed like the vast ocean while the scenes were like schools of fish swimming in it. They went about in no particular order. He wanted to catch the fish he needed the most but was powerless to do so. His consciousness was slipping away. Patriarch. When Nan Gongwei and Fengyi saw Yuan'er looking lifeless, they cried out in unison, appearing worried. Nan Gongwei stood up at once. He directed a palm at Yuan'er and channeled primal qi into him. A surge of intense primal qi was continuously channeled into Yuan'er's body. Perhaps, Nan Gongwei's effort worked. Yuan'er opened his eyes again, and a thought flashed in his mind. Ha! Her surname's Luo. Luo? Luo, what? The others were puzzled. Was there a cultivating genius or sect in Great Yen with the surname Luo? Zhou stroked his beard as he contemplated this. He suddenly remembered what Wuya said, if heaven and earth formed the cage, and the golden lotus was the lock, who was the entity pulling the strings behind the scenes? He felt shocked when this thought appeared in his mind. He shook his head, dismissing it. It was impossible. Humans were humans. Who could turn heaven and earth into a cage? What was the answer? What's her name? Zhou asked again. Perhaps, he would get an answer once he found this person. I can't remember. The core disciples gathered around them on heaven's virtue. Some of them were tearing up. Sobs grew louder and louder. Some of them fell to their knees. Lang Luo and Hua Wudao shook their heads. Hua Wudao cupped his fists and bowed at Zhou. Zhou knew what he meant. He waved his sleeve lightly. Like some on the Holy Land, Hua Wudao fell to his knees. After all, he had been in this sect before. Brother Ji, do you think that we'll meet again, in death? Yuan'er raised his hand as though he saw something and was reaching out to grasp it. Alas, his big wizened hand was only grasping at air. He did not stop his movement even as it grew slower and slower before he finally stiffened and stopped moving. His arm remained raised. The light in his eyes was snuffed out and turned lifeless. Patriarch. A voice laden with grief resounded across heaven's virtue. The barriers of the 10 holy lands lit up at this moment. The thousands of disciples of the 3 sects who could fly approached the barriers and channeled their primal chi into them. The tidal wave of primal chi illuminated the dozens of barriers. On heaven's virtue, the top of the cultivation tower dimmed. The life of a legend of the times had run its course. Zhou raised his hand. A surge of energy lifted Yuan'er up. Fengyi was still in pain. He was shocked when he saw this. He was about to stand up when Nangongwei pressed on his shoulder. The other disciples looked up. Zhou stepped into the air. He brought Yuan'er up into the air above heaven's virtue. He pushed with his palm. To gain the power of immaterial existence so that we may visit many places without having to move, reaping many benefits. A faint blue lotus emerged from his palm. A powerful surge of vitality wrapped around Yuan'er like a tidal wave. The blue lotus blossomed. Everyone else held their breaths. What a powerful life force. Healing? What healing technique is this? Nangongwei and Fengyi were stunned by this sight. They realized Zhou was trying to save their patriarch. The thousands of disciples stared at the blossoming blue lotus. It spread out from the center of heaven's virtue. The withered and shriveled plants on the Holy Land began to bloom once again. They felt a power surge from this blue lotus. They thought that this was the power of the 9-leaf stage that was shrouding Yuan'er's body. The blue lotus was now in full bloom. Boom. After it blossomed, everything fell silent once more. After the dazzling blue radiance faded away, Yuan'er was no longer anywhere to be seen in the sky. The glittering starlight descended upon the Holy Land. Zhou frowned. He hovered above the Holy Land, shook his head, and said with a sigh, "It's not easy to pull someone back from death." In other words, he had failed. Even the 4th heavenly writing power, coupled with half of the heavenly writing's extraordinary power, could not turn back the clock of a person's life or bring a person back to life. This was how life was supposed to be. Zhou had no intention of doing this initially. He had acted on a whim. Even if he was successful in saving Yuan'er, he would only be able to add a few more years to Yuan'er's life. Alas, he could not defy the heavens. The barrier of heaven's virtue resonated loudly. The disciples were prostrated on the ground. The dead were to be respected. Even Mingxian and little Yuan, who were usually rather playful, were solemn. Just when Zhou was about to descend, Nangongwei fought back his sadness and called out, "Please guide the 3 sects, old senior G. Please guide the 3 sects, old senior G." Before this, the conflicts between the 3 sects had already escalated. During the 100 years their patriarch had gone into seclusion, the feud of the 3 sects had veered out of control. The Yuan sect only had itself to blame for the situation it was in. Although the 3 sects still had a strong foundation, nobody could be certain of surviving in a world full of uncertainties, especially now that it was proven possible to attain the 9-leaf stage. Everyone below the 9-leaf stage was like insects. Yuan Wuji, the sect master of the Yuan sect, was dead. The remaining members of the Yuan sect were without a leader now. Chaos would certainly ensue. If the patriarch, Yuan'er, was still around, things might be able to remain under control. However, even the patriarch had departed for the afterlife, who would be able to keep them under control? Nangongwei and Fengyi were of the same rank. None of them could say they were not biased. Hence, the most proper course of action was to have the Evil Sky Pavilion oversee their matters. After all, the patriarch of the Evil Sky Pavilion was the first known 9-leaf cultivator. With the support of a 9-leaf cultivator, the 3 sects would have nothing to worry about. Nangongwei was more aware of this than anyone else. Zhou merely proved that it was possible to attain the 9-leaf stage. Nobody knew how perilous or difficult the path to attain the 9-leaf stage was. If they had a 9-leaf cultivator guiding them, their path to the 9-leaf stage would inadvertently be smoother. The 2 sect masters and the disciples of the 3 sects looked at Zhou expectantly. Zhou glanced at the dozens of barriers, the disciples in the sky, and the tower on heaven's virtue. Then, he shook his head. The fates of men are dictated by the heavens. The Evil Sky Pavilion isn't a charity organization. Nan Gongwei looked disappointed. But, the Patriarch. You dare mention Yuan'er again? Zhou glanced at them. There was no need for him to finish his sentence. Perhaps, because he was also a patriarch, he could also empathize with Yuan'er. The Yuan sect's Yuan Wuji had tricked his master and denounced his patriarch. If Nan Gongwei and Fengiji had cared more, they could have stopped this from happening. It was just like the siege of Golden Court Mountain by the 10 great sections. If only Zhenghai or Shangren was there, none of the 10 great sects would have dared to challenge the Evil Sky Pavilion. At this juncture, it was meaningless to dwell upon these matters. Zhou turned around and walked toward the cloud-splitting chariot. Little Yuan, Mingxirin, and Lang Luo followed suit. When Hua Wudao saw this, he bowed thrice, expressionlessly, in the direction of heaven's virtue. Elder Hua, can you put in a good word or two for us in front of old Senior Ji? Nan Gongwei pleaded. Hua Wudao's expression remained indifferent. He was still grieving Yun Tianluo's death and had no mood to entertain this request. He only shook his head and said, "You have to bear the consequences of your own actions." Then, he quickly left the area. He no longer had any sentiments toward the 3 sects. Zhou Yushu shook her head. Similarly, she turned around and left as well. Upon seeing this, Lu Ping, the second elder of the Luo sect, hurried over. Old senior. I'll man the helm for you." When Shan Yunzheng saw Lu Ping's behavior, she was annoyed and embarrassed. She was about to reprimand him when Fengiji said in a deep voice, "Shut your mouth." Fengyi's gaze darkened. Shan Yunzheng was so frightened that she dared not speak up. He was the sect master of the Luo sect, after all. The elders from the Luo sect were, naturally, afraid of him. The others looked on as the Evil Sky Pavilion's flying chariot slowly rose into the air. It passed through the barriers and disappeared into the clouds. Then, Fengiji turned to look at Shan Yunzheng and asked, "Shan Yunzheng, are you tired of living?" "Huh? If Lu Ping wants to flatter the Evil Sky Pavilion, let him be. Can you bear the consequences of offending a 9-leaf cultivator?" But the Evil Sky Pavilion is looking down on us." Shan Yunzheng cried out self-righteously. "It's their freedom to do as they please," Fengiji retorted. Nan Gongwei nodded. To put it more precisely, the Evil Sky Pavilion doesn't think much of anyone now. Let's not think too highly of ourselves. This isn't important. Pass down my order. Yes, sect master. Inform everyone in the 3 sects to stick to this story. The Evil Sky Pavilion has personally visited Heaven's Virtue and instructed the 3 sects in their cultivation. The disciples were taken aback. One of them looked up and asked, "That's it?" "That will be enough." Fengiji nodded. Nan Gongwei and Fengiji exchanged a glance and smiled. The core elders near them quickly understood their intentions. All they needed was to send one message to the outside world: the relationship between the Evil Sky Pavilion and the 3 sects was special. They would leave the rest up to the imagination of the outside world. As the saying went, the less one was told, the more mysterious one would seem. With this, who would dare underestimate the 3 sects? On the cloud-splitting chariot, Lu Ping steered the flying chariot past the final barrier. He did this with ease of familiarity. The flight was smooth and stable. Mingxirin praised him. "Not bad. Are you interested in joining the Evil Sky Pavilion?" When Lu Ping heard this, he asked excitedly, "Really? Can I?" Currently, was there anyone who did not want to join the Evil Sky Pavilion? No, Mingxirin replied mercilessly. If this were in the past, Mingxirin might have tried to persuade Zhou to accept Lu Ping. However, the current Evil Sky Pavilion was different. They would only recruit those who were truly strong. Zhou Yu'er frowned when she saw this. The Evil Sky Pavilion won't even consider a nascent divinity tribulation realm cultivator? She turned to look at Lu Zhou and discovered him deep in thought. Lu Zhou was staring at the sea of clouds and the mountain ranges, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. Luo. What's her full name? Who is she? What secrets is she keeping? If she was someone capable of making the mediocre Yuan'er Luo reach such heights in such a short time, she should have been famous 300 years ago. How was it that nobody had heard of her? Yuan'er Luo did not know, Lang Luo did not know, and Hua Wudao did not know as well. When Zhou Yu'er heard the word Luo, she asked, "Are you thinking about that mysterious person, Brother Ji?" She's someone who holds the secrets of the 9-leaf, and possibly, the 10-leaf stage. Aren't you interested? Alas, I have never heard of such a person, Zhou Yu'er replied. Upon hearing this, Mingxirin asked, isn't it normal for an elite like that to stay hidden from the world? If what Yuan'er Luo said is true, this person must possess an extremely profound cultivation base, Lang Luo added. That's right. A random cultivation method from her turned him into the chief of the 3 sects. Compared to my master, she seems. Mingxirin swallowed his words halfway. He had almost said that person seemed stronger than his master. However, when he recalled, his master had to instruct 9 disciples while the mysterious woman only taught 1 person, he felt he could not compare the two. Zhou Yu'er suddenly turned around and placed her walking stick on the floor. She fell to one knee, lowered her head, and said, I had no intention of offending the Evil Sky Pavilion before this. I wish to apologize to you, big brother. I'll have no complaints, no matter the punishment. Based on how she addressed Lu Zhou as big brother, it seemed she was not completely tactless even if her tone was awkward. Lu Zhou looked at her and said, I can let bygones be bygones. Zhou Yu'er was overjoyed to hear this. She was about to thank Lu Zhou when Lu Zhou said, but I have one condition. Whatever it is, big brother, just say it. I'll agree to 10 conditions, let alone 1, Zhou Yu'er said. Hear me out. Lu Zhou's expression was extremely gentle. He did not seem as frightening and stern as he did earlier. At this moment, he resembled an amiable old man. My condition is simple. Join the Evil Sky Pavilion and serve me. Don't agree to this hastily. Think about it carefully. When you've made up your mind, you can tell me your answer. Zhou Yu'er was stunned. The others looked at Zhou Yu'er as well. Little Yuan looked up. She found this tactic familiar. She instinctively said, Master, should I count down from 10? Here goes. Lu Zhou remained silent, but his eyes were trained on Zhou Yu'er, clearly waiting for her answer. Despite his words, it was clear she had no other choice but to accept. Zhou Yu'er wondered what was there to think about? It was obvious she had no choice. Meanwhile, Lu Ping, who was standing at the side, looked so envious that it seemed like he was about to cry. He could not blame the Evil Sky Pavilion for not accepting him. How could he compare to Zhou Yu'er? He was just like an insignificant sesame seed stuck in the crack on the ground compared to her. After mulling over it for a beat, Zhou Yu'er answered, all right. Ding. Gained a subordinate. Reward, 1,000 merit points. Lu Zhou had expected this notification. He wondered again if he should mass recruit people on Golden Court Mountain since gaining subordinates earned him merit points. After all, Golden Court Mountain was huge, and its inhabitants were few. It was barely manageable for the female cultivators of Derived Moon Palace to look after the place. However, he was worried that the rewards would be too low to justify the cost of feeding so many people. He could not turn the Evil Sky Pavilion into a charity house just because he wanted to earn merit points. After a moment, Lu Zhou said, rise and speak. Zhou Yu'er rose to her feet. Lang Luo cupped his hands as a form of greeting. Hua Wudao said, greetings, Elder Zhou. Lu Zhou said, you've been staying in the valley all these years and are unaware of the matters of the world. You should be at the 8-leaf stage. Why did you choose to live in seclusion in the valley? Zhou was also a legend of her time, after all. Zhou shook her head and sighed. There's no need to revisit the past. Since you're now part of the Evil Sky Pavilion, there's something I have to say, Zhou said. Feel free to speak, big brother. I have no intention of looking for trouble with Great Yan's imperial family. However, the imperial family has challenged the Evil Sky Pavilion repeatedly on several occasions. There are many Confucian sect elites living in the divine capital, and many of them hold positions of power. If the time comes, it'd do you good to remain unswayed, Zhou said tonelessly. Zhou was shocked when she heard Zhou's words. It was common knowledge that many Confucian sect elites were officials. The imperial family had always been the most powerful faction in the empire. It would not have been able to maintain peace and order otherwise. How was the Evil Sky Pavilion supposed to fight against the divine capital? She suddenly felt as though she had been tricked to join the Evil Sky Pavilion. However, the feeling did not last long when she remembered they had a 9-leaf cultivator in their ranks. Meanwhile, in the Evil Sky Pavilion, Yuan'er stood before the Cave of Reflection. There were many female cultivators in the vicinity. Panzhong and Zhou Jifeng were there as well. They regarded Yuan'er with looks of admiration. The Sword Devil's return filled them with excitement and shock. The Sword Devil, whose name struck fear in those who heard it, was still alive. The rumors in the cultivation world say that you're gravely injured and possibly dead, second senior brother. See Wuya's rang from the cave. Yuan'er smiled faintly. They are merely rumors. Pay no heed to them. Do you know that Master is already at the 9-leaf stage, second senior brother? Si Wuya asked. I do. His reply was light and calm as well. Aren't you worried? Worried? Yuan'er looked at Si Wuya from the corners of his eyes. The ones who should be worried are our enemies. Si Wuya was at a loss for words. After a moment, he said, I'm worried for eldest senior brother. Yuan'er frowned slightly and said, well, he brought it upon himself. Eldest senior brother. 7th junior brother, I've always thought highly of you. If it weren't out of consideration for you, I would have fought with all my might at Radiant Cloud Forest back then, Yuan'er said. Si Wuya shook his head helplessly. He could not understand why his eldest senior brother and second senior brother behaved like nemesis. To his knowledge, there should be no deep-rooted grudge between both of them. They only had minor conflicts, at most. Since they were fellow disciples, was it not better for them to sit down, talk it over, and let bygones be bygones? Despite his thoughts, he said, you're right, second senior brother. As long as you understand, Yuan'er said, reflect on yourself in the cave. I know what to do about eldest senior brother. When Si Wuya sensed that Yuan'er was about to leave, he hastily called out, second senior brother. Yuan'er stopped in his tracks. Si Wuya continued to say, Master has taken a personal letter from me. If you have the chance, I wish for you to read it. All right. Yuan'er's reply was direct and simple. He turned and walked toward the southern pavilion. Zhou Yu appeared nearby. She was clearly anxious. She looked around, and when she saw Yuan'er, she hastily walked up to him. Second senior brother. Why are you so anxious? Yuan'er asked, puzzled. It's an emergency. An important matter. Zhou Yu pointed at the letter in her hand. There's no need to panic. Master isn't around, but I'm here. Yuan'er received the letter from her. It read, Old Senior, some good news for you. The cultivation world is entering the Lotus Severing era. The Big Dipper Academy and Yang Sect collaborated and developed the Lotus Severing Survival Pills and Leaf Sprouting Pills. The Lotus Severing Survival Pills can prevent cultivators from being fatally wounded, while the Leaf Sprouting Pills guarantee that the cultivator will be able to sprout leaves again. I'm truly witnessing history in the making here.